All right, Les, looks like we're good. You'll have to unmute, Les. I think you're muted right now. There you go.
Everyone. I think this is our third video conference and appreciate you all participating. Why don't we start off, we're still short David, who had a big agenda item, but hopefully he'll show up. We're going to take a look at the minutes. We just, oh yeah, we lost, I think. Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
We approve them as is.
Yes, as is. They were nice and concise. Second.
Second.
Vote, all in favor? But let me go around the horn. Diane?
Yes.
Jane? Michael?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
Okay, it carries 4-0, so minutes from May have been approved. I was going to just say a few words, and they're not. I wanted to start off the meeting. You all know we're missing a picture on here, and I think we all were texting each other the night it happened when Jerry Naismith passed away, and I think the words were like shock, oh my God, and I'm going to miss him personally. I knew Jerry for about 2 years when he joined us. He took Sharon's place, and the thoughts I had when I think of Jerry was he had great passion for the outfit. He was a great supporter, and I think Jerry also brought a real good sense of business acumen, and he also helped us steer our way through ACC Gov. Jerry even participated, if you remember, the early morning strategy sessions. He was very active in the SCASNet grant, so he's going to be missed, and I think Athens has really lost a very valuable and talented person. I asked Michael Pierce if he'd say a few words, if that's still okay. Michael, you knew Jerry a long time, I believe.
Yes, Les, I'm happy to just say a few words. Came from Emory. He was IT director at Emory and took a job in charge of our research stores at UGA, and then he graduated from that to be in charge of research computing at UGA. Very valuable member of our community. So I got to work with him on a lot of different projects. He had an extensive background in computer hardware and computer software, sales, code development. I mean, just an extensive experience, and he brought all of that expertise when he moved to Athens. I got to know him over the rest of the time, and then when he became a commissioner of District 6, I would meet with him occasionally and just discuss what was going on in Athens, and I was always really and how concerned he was about making Athens a better place, an inclusive place for everyone. And I think two of many, but two notable things that he will be remembered for are the first is starting the farmers market in Bishop's Park. He was a founding director and the treasurer of the Athens Farmers Market, which is a wonderful, wonderful enterprise, and I think keeps expanding. And he was also instrumental in and was a board member of the Advantage Behavioral Health Systems in Athens that provides an alternative solution to problems that people may be having that bridges between interfacing with law enforcement or versus the hospitalization, the medical community. So we have resources in the community now for people who are having problems. They can be directed to a counselor. They can get solutions that they just never had available before. He was really dedicated district, but of course he could see well beyond that, and I think that's one of the reasons he was so active in coming to our authority meetings, because he really saw the potential of the airport to increase and provide many other services to the Athens community, and that vision, and he was doing everything he could to make it a reality. So we're really going to miss him, and I think we've all lost a friend.
Agreed. Anyone else want to say anything? Or yeah, it's going to be odd not seeing Jerry there, or having to tell him to silence his phone, but we will miss him. We also have two more people. Fortunately, Michael and Bain. This is their last meeting, and we're going to hold off some comments till the end. So, but this is their last meeting too, and they're going to be very missed, both of you, both personally and professionally. So, that said, turn it over to Mike. Mike's going to go over the financial reports and the rest of the manager's report. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
put myself to you.
All right, so let's look at our financial report for May. Let me pull this up. So here's our financial report for May. We have had a loss of $22,471 for May 2020. However, we're still ahead in revenues for the year, $312,938. It's not quite. Let me scroll down a little bit. We're still holding our own. I mean, we did have, of course, a loss, as I say. We took a hit on the fuel sales revenue, but we're starting to see aviation slowly kick back in. Let me go back up to revenues. And you can see our avgas actual versus our budget, and our Jet A actual versus our budget. We're able to purchase some Jet A at the price of fuel when fuel was at a low, and we're seeing prices starting to slowly creep back up, as you can tell from the pumps. Leases are holding steady. Still not. We still have variance, and that was mostly because of Falcon. If you remember, they moved from the commercial terminal, and during that year when we budgeted this, and went into another hangar, the one near the terminal. But airport fees are way down due to the lack of corporate and charter business. I think March 13th was the last charter we had, and we still had, we would have had several charters to go, baseball, of course, and other charters that were on the books to come in at that time. If you go, let's go down. I'll go to the operations here. So looking at the gallons sold, actual month was 4,000 for avgas. Jet A was 10,000. April's avgas was 1,900, and so you can see we're at 4,000. So it's increasing, thankfully. And then in May, you see gallons for Jet A is 10,000. In April, it was 4,000. I'm sorry, it was 3,300 rather. So that's increased substantial. So And we're seeing an increase in this month as well. We've seen more traffic come in. Flying public's coming in a little more. We see a lot of flight instruction, not so much here, but at other airports coming in here. And I did talk to a flight instructor from another airport yesterday, and she said, that her business is doing great. People are still flying. Corporate, people are coming in. Some are coming in masks, and especially the wheels up, and those types, net jets. They're coming in. Pilots are coming in masks, and everybody's being very cautious still. Any questions so far on that? Go down to the operations, and you see the actual month of May was 2,054. April was pretty much at the lowest. I've only been here 2 years, but I can't imagine it getting any lower than April is at 1,615. So it's slowly increasing. Since I've been here, I've seen an average of about 3,800 to 4,000 a month. And so we still have a long way to go before we hit that, but it is thankfully getting better. Any questions on the financials or operations? Get out of there. Moving on to the project update. We opened up bids for Taxiway Alpha project. We were able to, GDOT was able to fund, and FAA was able to fund Schedule A and C of that project. If you remember, A was pretty much from our tarmac. If you're facing the runways from the tarmac to the right, to the west, all that taxiway there. And then we had a Schedule B in there as well, which was actually the parallel section along with the east taxiway. We're not able to fund that. They didn't have the money at the time to do this. But we were able to do Schedule A and then also Schedule C, which is the dire of getting the localizer moved out of our safety area. So that is in there as well. So A and C, but not B at this time. There's a possibility that there may be some funding available later for this, but we won't know that for several months. So we have an agenda item in to the mayor and commission to vote at their July 7th meeting to award the bid for both Schedule A and C to the lowest bidder, who was Astra. So I've heard some good things about them. I've talked to other airports. I feel good about them, and I think they'll do a good job. These projects will keep us busy and be a great addition, to our capital improvement plan on the airport. Any questions on that? Moving on to marketing and outreach. Unfortunately, I have not done anything on marketing and outreach that I can remember. Les, do you know? We done it. Les usually keeps me going on marketing and outreach, but I'm not done anything in
No
May.
more.
Yeah. As far as the COVID-19 impact, we're still close to the general public. However, like all airports, we're open to the flying public. So business is going on as normal in that regard. We're still having pilots come in, passengers coming in. We do have a sign out front that says closed to the general public. I did put in a request to the county manager to open back up. So I'm kind of waiting to hear back from there. I have talked to other airports, and a lot of them are open for business as far as general public. But even if we open up for general public, I don't see a whole lot of change from what's going on now. We don't get a whole lot of general public. If they're here, they have a reason, and I consider them flying public. So it'd pretty much be businesses as going on right now, when we do open it up to, say, the general public. So that's where we are right now. I know that I hadn't had a chance to talk to Josh at all, but I know that Les was wondering how the county was going. Do you have any input, Josh, as far as the county and where we stand on that?
In terms of COVID-19 response?
Yeah.
We're continuing to slowly reopen, and looking towards our directors and our departments to define what that means. And so, in one of those charts, I think we shared a couple meetings back, we're still in this phase 3 response, which, many of our departments that have public in-person visits are still by appointment only, but you can walk into some of our buildings and facilities as well. So we're taking on a case-by-case basis. And so, we're working with Mike in the airport to help figure out when the right time is based on his recommendations. So we appreciate he and his staff's great work. Our main goal is to keep both our employees and our residents safe. And so, I know that the airport's gotten awarded some cloth masks as well, or some masks, I should say, from the FAA, which is a great gesture as well. So I think those are the things we're thinking through and we're taking seriously. And we've been very happy to see kind of the positive results. And we do think that the lower numbers in our Athens-Clarke County have a lot to do with our residents and our mayor and commission very early on implementing some of the changes that they did and some of the policy that they implemented. And so we are benefiting from that, but we're very aware that the fall could be very different. And as I'm sure y'all are aware, based on the news, numbers are slowly going up all over the country. And so we're expecting to go back into phase 2 if that trend continues, and we see that in Athens-Clarke County in late fall. And so whatever we do now to reopen, we might very likely be closing again for a short period. But that is all based on data and waiting to make sure that decision's made with all understanding. So far, Athens-Clarke County is doing really well, and many of our businesses are back open, and we're trying to respond to what our residents need in terms of services, and many of our employees are back in the office.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. I know we hadn't talked about that, but that's some good information. And also, I appreciate you bringing up the masks, which I forgot about. We did get them in yesterday. I got a call from the FAA probably, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. And they were asking, they're talking to all the airports. I think Hartsfield got 1 million masks. We got 3,000 of them. And mostly for passengers, pilots that come in, and they're just available to them. They're cotton masks, and they're available to our customers that come in that want masks, don't have any masks on them. Of course, that helps protect them and us too. So we'll be handing those out as well. Any questions about the COVID-19?
Thank you, Mike. Now we'll get to any questions for Mike or anyone else? Nope. Thank you, Josh. Next thing was some old business carryover, Mike. We've been talking about leases. By the way, is David, are you on the, I see 2 call-ins now. Is that David?
David is on. Sorry, it's loud where I am right now. I'm trying to get to somewhere it's a little quieter.
Okay. So, Mike was going to give a quick update on the leases.
All right. So, so the old Falcon hangar will be ours. Would be turned over to us at the end of July. I'm working on getting that lease completed with the new tenant of that hangar once we take it over. On another note, I did give a 60-day notice to vacate the Sonny's hangar to the current tenant in it now. That tenant actually is leasing another hangar that he has his main operations. It's a maintenance shop, and he is interested in the Colvin hangar. I did talk to GDOT about the proper way of doing this. Do we need to do an RFP or on this, or since he is moving from one hangar, we're kind of taking him out of one hangar. Is it okay just to offer him a Colvin hangar? And they said yes, that would be fine. So that's my intent, is to negotiate a lease with him on that Colvin hangar, which we're doing, in the process of doing that now. I continue to work on the new T hangar leases. Hope to have them ready by the end of July. Still, have to get with the county attorney and finalize all of that, but that's moving in the right direction.
Any questions from Mike? And again, we've talked about David, when the time permits, and Mike going to be working on an inventory as well as we're working on standardizing the leases. And part of the inventory too is to make sure that the hangars are being used for air-related purposes and not just storing a hot dog cart or something in the hangar. So
Yeah, that's correct. And that's where the T hangar leases, the new ones, when they come into effect, a lot of that will give us, and I think the ones we have now give us the ability to go in and inspect them. And talking to David, and a lot of the other airport managers, some of them have a key, that's, or a lock rather, in conjunction with the tenant's lock. And so either one can get into that hangar at any time. It's just to make sure that everything is safe, that everything in there is aviation related. They're just not storing things that aren't supposed to be in there. It is meant for aviation and airplanes and that sort of thing. So we don't want it to be a catch-all for storage. That's not what it's meant to be. And of course, if it is that way, we're not making any money off of it. So that is an important aspect.
Mhm. Okay, Diane, do you want to update us on the Lexington corridor, or turn on your microphone? Can't hear you.
Just a couple of quick updates. You might remember that on the 9th of this month, I sent everybody the call for public input on the potential projects along the Lexington corridor and also the Atlanta Highway. So just wanted to remind you, if you haven't taken that little survey, the deadline for that is the 28th of June, which is coming up. It's only a small survey, a couple of questions. But I think given that the potential projects list that I have shared with you before, 3 of the 6 have direct potential benefit for the airport. So, I just think it would be great if we could all send in our individual responses on the survey as well. After that, the mayor and commissioners are supposed to be voting on the list of potential projects in the July 7 meeting. So that's the next big step. And then in September, October, there's another opportunity for public input before, the final decisions. So as you know, public input is very important. So I just think that given, there's some big items for the airport, I hope we can all add our 2 cents worth. Secondly, related, you remember the little park project that we have going for the grove of trees on the airport property? I got a nice update from Todd Miller last week in the Office of Park Planning. It wasn't anything surprising. I mean, he just said that under the COVID-19 response, many of them actually had been reassigned to other tasks and to top priority tasks, but now they actually are all back at work on their regular assignments. And he wanted to let me know that, they're working on the Bear Hollow improvements that were funded. And when they finish those, they're going to turn to the little park at the airport. So it's a small item, but it's a tiny bit of good news, and I thanked him for letting us know. So those are the updates. Thanks, Liz.
Any questions? Turning it back to Mike, we should have just, I think Mike mentioned last meeting, even the July 4th fireworks, which are actually July 3rd, but I'm starting to see finally some media coverage. So it sounds pretty elaborate. If you could update us, Mike.
Sure. We've been having regular meetings with the police department, fire, and of course leisure services, and I think it's going to be a great event. It really, really is. Everybody's got the plans that they need to have in place to make it a success. I've got FAA approval for the event. FAA is good. I think let's see. And we did meet with the pyrotechnics folks, and I don't know how to explain this, but between the main runway and Lexington, halfway between there, we call it Bravo 2. It's an intersection off the runway. That's where we'll stage it on the second runway. It'll be closed, of course. I'm going to close the airport. The fireworks start about 9:30. I'll close the airport probably around a little before 9. I'll be monitoring the radio because the tower closes at 8, and make sure that there's no traffic in the area, and I'll continue to make those announcements. And and then they'll go from about 9:30, probably 25 minutes. And I have flown before, and I'm sure David has too, and some of the other pilots. I have taken off in Rome. I was there, and when I knew fireworks were going to be going off, and just fly around, the area and watching them, from the air. It's wonderful. But I wonder how many pilots will do that. I do not know, but we'll have a good note them out, so all the pilots in the area will know to stay clear. They'll go to about 800 feet, I think, is the highest, and so it's going to be really good. It's going to be a good event.
I think you had mentioned that there really won't be people on the grounds of the airport. It'll be
Not inside the fence, no, and not even inside Ben Epps Drive. We'll have police protection there as far as not allowing anybody in except for tenants or folks that have business here. But there will be parking off of Buddy Christian Road. We have a field out there, so they'll be parking there. We've been cutting it and kept it pretty low because I think they want to go ahead and mark it with the white markings, kind of space it out for people to have distancing, and then also Satterfield Park. So that's an area. And then there's other areas as well, but they're just telling people that be sure that you're courteous and don't park on private property and that kind of thing. So yeah, so it's going to be a great event.
great. Okie dokie. Next topic, and we just lost Josh, it looks like.
Yeah, he had to leave. Yeah, he just texted me and said he was had to leave.
Y'all are probably maybe getting tired.
Can I ask a quick question about that? The fireworks, one quick thing, because you talked about all that area. Has that church adjacent to the airport been made aware of this?
I think they have, but I will check on that. Is that Tuxton, or which church is that?
No, not Tuxton. I can't think of the name of it myself, and that's why I hesitated to even ask the question. But I can find out and then just contact you and give you a contact name and person to make sure that they're aware. Even though they're not having services, I know they've got a parking lot there, but I know it's gated also, and I think it's fenced and locked, and it may be something that they may want to open up for that evening for the community or parishioners.
Okay, yes, if you could just send me that information, and I'll call Melanie, make sure.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mike, can I just make another comment?
Absolutely.
I spoke with Mike about the animal services shelter, which is right there. And I did talk with Sailor Gardner, the volunteer coordinator, and she said they are aware of the fireworks event coming. And actually, they've got a big foster event going for that weekend. And they're actually hoping to have nearly all of the dogs away from that facility in foster, which is good.
Good.
Alrighty, I'm going to tee up. I never know how much detail or not to go in the performance measures, but I wanted to make a couple of points. One is that this is the next step after Bain and Mike developed the financial statements, is to develop a more robust set of performance measures. It was probably one of the greatest weaknesses in our SWOT. And we're not just doing it to have a report, it will become a part of the airport manager reports, and it'll allow us to look at some of the measures that are either very good or not performing that well to figure out if we can take some action. So we're ahead of schedule. The goal is to roll these out for the July numbers in August. We're also probably going to be the beta side or pilot side. Josh and the county are rolling out a whole set of similar tools that we've been working closely with Josh. So we're going to be able just to roll our information into his new tool. So let me just give you a flavor for this without going over the details. Mike, I'm going to try and take over the screen.
All righty, go ahead.
I think I got it. Forgive me. Okay, can you all see? Remember, there were two sets of measures, and I'm only going to focus on the ones that have changed since Mike and I met with Josh last time. But you can see that we're using red, green, and yellow. Made an arbitrary decision. If we're in about 5 or 10%, it'll be green. Yellow is about 10 to 20, and red is if we missed by more than 20%. So you can see under our mission, we are reporting all the 4 or 5 measures we had. We are going to wait till the first quarter of fiscal year 21 to take some input from Mike, work with Angela, maybe David, to fine tune our tenant and customer evaluations. The one thing that we need to really work on, the devil's in the details, is the economic impact. $20 million is huge. We're waiting to hear from GDOT. They should be issuing a new report. But I don't think we can have a measure that you only find out about every 9 years. So we've had chats with Josh, and some other folks have pointed out, Amanda Hill, that there are pragmatic ways to update this, and this may be a good project for the Terry Business School to help us figure out a simple way to annually update the economic impact. Moving on, we'll talk later about goal 1, which needs to be, Josh has really helped us, needs to be rewritten more around infrastructure. One of the things we're going to be tracking is large charter passenger enplanements. We found out in working with Angela and Mike, they were really great about this, that we've been relying in the past on an FAA report that comes out a year after the fact. Mike and Angela found that the ops group is calculating this every month. So going forward, we'll get a monthly report on that. Mike talked about the annual operations. You can see we're doing green on most things. We would have made green if COVID hadn't happened. So moving on, things we're able to report, we've hit our goal for the UGA students. And these all tie back again to our strategic commitments. Josh suggested that if we were, even though we're not working on an initiative such as the aviation maintenance, we should just fess up, and essentially it's a 0 till we start working on it. The one thing that has shifted since March and April is our financial goal of being self-funding. We were doing great until March, April, and May. But we're still doing great. We are just $5,000 over. That's the amount we would need for us to break even for the year. So given what's happened, we'll probably fall less than $10,000. Our target was we were going to need 105, so we're 95 for the good. Operating revenue increased over prior year. We were going to hit our goal of 26%, and that was before February. So we're still going to be greater than 0, but we won't be at 26%. So again, these measures all go back to our strategy. Operational measures are the more interesting ones in the sense that these are things we think we can manage to get ahead of the curve on the results. So we had for safety, and I'm glad Jacob's here. We used to have a thing called PCI score for the pavement on the runway. There's a new thing called PCN. Jacob and Mike have helped me try and understand it. I'm not sure you probably want to spend a lot of time, but just, and Jacob, please, if I'm wrong about this, and Mike, a PCN score is, takes in all sorts of aspects of the pavement, but it's not a 0 to 1. The real purpose of this number is then airplanes have a related score that's called ACN. And based on the weight of the airport, you are PC 20 needs an AC 30, you won't be able to land. So the good news is anything below the size of a 700, 727, 7200 or a Aerobus 200, you can easily handle. Jacob, did you want to say anything about this?
No, I think you got it right. It's not a response to that or below, then it would be okay. So it gives you a quick reference and gives the pilots a quick reference whether or not they can land there.
And this is a big issue for us, relates to safety, because some of ours are still probably are below this number. We're going to be tracking our FAA inspections. The last one really was the end of June, but we counted it for this fiscal year. So we passed in June with 3 discrepancies. I think when you look at these numbers, they're different than they extrapolate from the financial statements. You can see We're doing great on the leases. We have pretty well fully rented. And you can see what Mike showed here, that we're red, what's hurting us. And it's not just been March and April, it's been, we're just not selling what we thought we would on avgas. We were definitely going great, you can see on jet fuel A. So then the other things in the managing our finances, we wanted to make sure our operating income, our goal was to have a 0% with budget. The variances actually were 48% to the good, which is terrific. Revenue to operating expenses, we're still 226%, which is phenomenal. You can see our gross margin on fuel sales is a little below where we planned, but we're actually, and that was an absolute number. And when you see that we're actually, the gross margin for jet fuel and avgas, we're doing better than we thought. The problem is really one of just not selling enough fuel. So those pretty much are the measures. And again, they start telling a story, and we should have these in effect for August when we report on July. I've also set up, I had nothing to do, some spreadsheets where you just enter the data and it's ported into these numbers. So that's the measures. I'll send these out to everyone. And if you have any comments, holler. And again, thank Josh, Mike, and Angela for helping pull this together. Any questions? So I'll stop sharing if I know how. Okay, next topic will be airport appointments. Mike, you have an update on that?
I do. Because of the virus, things have been kind of moved around a little bit. The interviews are going to be held June 29th, and appointments would be July 7th at their meeting. So that's where it stands right now.
Okay. And then the big topic on the agenda, probably the biggest one today, will be the request for the overlay district. And David, are you there?
I'm here.
You ready to chat?
Yeah.
Oh, Dave,
I'm
before
ready.
you get going, Mike and I chatted today. I think what we'd like to do is, there were 3 of these. If you present one at a time, and we will make your recommendation, and then we'll vote on each one before you move on to the next one, okay?
Yeah, sure.
One last thing. Do you want to just explain what in 25 words or less, what just the overlay district in general is, and the concept?
Okay, so yeah, sure. So the airport has protected space around it, surrounding the airport, and starting at the runway and going upward from ground level at the airport, sloping upward. Depending on which type of space we're referring to, that slope is different, and how far out it goes is different. The 3 that we'll talk about today are the transition zone, the AZ2 area, which is the non-precision approach for a main runway zone, and then the runway protection zone is the most stringent of the requirements. They all have different requirements. This is set forth by Mike, is it FAA Part 77, I believe? Those are the federal regulations that apply to these areas across all airports. This isn't an Athens-Clarke County thing, though Athens-Clarke County has adopted into its code the FAA's regulations and adheres to them. So anytime we have properties that want to be developed and they exist inside these zones, then the planning department comes to us and says, hey, this is what was presented to planning. We would like your recommendation. At that point, the operations committee, which is Robert and I, will meet with Mike, Angela. We met last week via WebEx with a few people from the planning department to discuss in more detail what exactly each of these properties entailed. Does anybody have any questions about those overlay areas.
And this is three-dimensional too. What's the thing?
Exactly. That's
the
the part
tricky part.
that's tough to really understand. You know, you can be within the overlay area, or you could be underneath the overlay area. So we'll talk about that specifically, and depending on which overlay we're talking about, the building requirements differ. When you're in the runway protection zone, you're severely limited into what can exist in that area, and that's real close to the runways. You've seen in a lot, or the FAA has seen in a lot of cities where that runway protection zone is not secured, and you get into all kinds of issues, the least of which are the nuisance issues of loud, noisy traffic, but the most of which is a public safety issue where you've got planes, possibly heavy loaded planes flying, and hopefully flying and landing where they're supposed to, but when things go wrong, you have a public safety issue. So critically important is keeping those runway protection zones secured too. We'll talk about, so going into these, the three properties, 498 Little Oak Street is west of the airport, the new development of the racetrack gas station. It's in a neighborhood kind of catty-cornered to where that racetrack is, just inside the loop off Lexington. Right now, that property is about a third of an acre, existing within the AZ2 airport overlay. It's actually underneath that airport overlay. If it were inside the airport overlay, then there would be stipulations about dividing it, which is what they want to do. They want to divide that third of an acre into two parcels and put a single family home on each of the two new lots that they create. We went back and forth a little bit. The planning department came to us about it because it talks about airport overlay. Mike, it's been established, correct, with Jacob, that this is underneath the airport overlay, correct?
Yes. You concur, Jacob? Is that what you find?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So being that it's underneath, and this is kind of abstract, but that airport overlay, it doesn't include it. With that in mind, it was my suggestion to Robert that we abstain from making a formal recommendation. Mike and I emailed. We can make a recommendation that we do not disapprove of that property moving forward with planning. It's not within our zone.
Yeah, or recommend to allow it, basically. Recommend to allow it.
I'm okay with any of those terms. There are other. The reason
David,
coming back.
Sorry, Les, there's a lot of echoing. I can't actually hear.
I can't hear a thing.
Yeah.
Are you there, David? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, we hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. Just from the airport authority standpoint, there's a lot involved with allowing a development to proceed. If it's not within our overlay, if it's actually underneath, then I don't. I take the position that somebody else can decide to allow it. I'm not going to stand in the way of them allowing it.
Okay.
I do not Robert, what are your feelings on?
I'm the same way that we do not chime in areas where we don't need to chime in.
Right. You know,
Well said.
I think the proper recommendation that the operations committee is going to make to the authority is that we really shouldn't have been consulted at all. It seems if it's outside our overlay area by being underneath it, then
if I may say this, the one thing that it does affect is the acreage in our overlay zone. It does say that I think it has to be an acre or above, so it is less than that acre. So actually, what we're doing is just making a recommendation to allow that acreage difference. I think that's basically what we're doing on that. So I think they do need a recommendation from us of some sort, but that was the reasoning I think behind the Little Oak and also Oconee, because I think Oconee was 0.59 acres, so that would be the same.
Right.
Them as well.
Right. It's essentially the same thing. The two issues that come up with the Coney Street, which is a little further out to the west, closer to downtown, were that it's a multifamily development and there's the smaller than 1 acre minimum. You know, but my interpretation of the code is that if it's underneath that overlay, then those stipulations would not apply since it's not within. But perhaps I'm misunderstanding, Jacob.
Well, it doesn't apply to the approaches, but as far as the acreage, it does. We do have to, I mean, it is in our overlay that it has to be an acre, but here we are. It's not quite an acre, but are we good with it or not good with it? And so, I mean, I'm okay with it. It's, but we do need a recommendation of some sort to get back to them. Yeah.
So, what do we? From what I hear, it sounds like we are. That's not a double negative. We are recommending that it's okay, for lack of.
Basically, yeah, to allow it, right?
Can I ask a question, please? When you make a recommendation, just point of procedure, I mean, do you have to actually provide rationale for the recommendation, or do we just tell them yes or no?
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's
Chime in.
yeah, please do. Yeah.
Okay. So normally what we do is, as chair of the committee, David will recommendation before the full authority. He will word it, and then the full authority will vote on that recommendation from the chair of the operations committee. That's how it's been done in the past.
Okay, but do we provide explanation to them?
We, unless they ask for a more detailed one, I mean, normally it's just, we usually have, there's been some wording in the past that we have sent to them that we can look up.
So do we have a recommendation?
Normally the recommendation is approval or not approval.
Okay.
And it's based on the current zoning ordinance. I think there's been some emails back and forth about the different ordinance that I've seen.
Right. I guess I'm just still unclear whether the zoning ordinance applies to areas underneath the AZ2 overlay.
It's my understanding that it always has, and we've never gotten into this much detail about. I go back to what Mike is saying about it's the lot size and where it's in location to the airport.
And I did check with Jacob on that, and I think what Jacob said that the FAA, and you could chime in too, Jacob, that the FAA under Part 77, they go by the slope, right? And what's underneath it is not.
It's the prevailing slope, whether you look at the distance or future. I look at both when I see some analysis.
So do we have, David, do you have a recommendation, Robert?
Well, I guess I thought I did have a recommendation until I got that email about these properties. Is that? I don't know what the feedback is. I don't think it's on my end, but
Here, let me.
I had presented Robert and I had presented a recommendation for discussion with Mike, and then I guess I'm unclear of whether the zoning ordinance still is applicable, being that the slope exists at a higher elevation than these properties exist. So if they're outside of, they're underneath the overlay, they're not within the overlay.
That is correct. They're not in the overlay, but then the factor we have to look at now is the acreage, because that is in our overlay zone, is that it has to be an acre or more, but it's less than an acre. So that's really what we're dealing with, not so much.
But that would only apply if it were within.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Area.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah, I got what you're saying.
So this area, sorry to be convoluted about it.
No, I see where you're going.
Looking down at it from above, yes, the boundaries overlap these lots, but if you're standing on the lot and looking up, you have room to go before you hit the overlay. And from that perspective, I think our recommendation would be to abstain because it doesn't involve us.
Well, and if it doesn't involve us, then we approve it. I would say it's good. But
Hey, Mike, I recommend that we also request that the contractor, whoever the designer, submit a 7460. I think I put those in all 3 emails.
That they what? I'm sorry.
7460.
Oh, 7460, right. Yeah. Okay.
Which is going to go to the FAA for approval.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. We have guidelines in the ordinance about good sense. Like, we can approve under the good sense building codes, and all of that is written in the ordinance already. And we've been known to do that before in properties such as this, where you really don't see, as long as there's not too many occupants on one land,
Okay.
you can do it with the good sense, which is already written into the ordinance. And what Jacob is saying is that 7460 is also written into our ordinance, I believe.
And what a 7460 is a FAA study done to make sure that it doesn't interfere with our approaches and that kind of thing.
Okay, that sounds perfect to me. Fourth, everybody. Robert, that sounds okay to you?
Yes, it does. Yes.
Okay. All right. So now, going back to the synopsis.
Jacob has a question. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Well, I just want to put my 2 cents on whether it's in or out. We're still reviewing that because most land's going to be up under it regardless. So what you're really looking at is what type of building, and that's really what you're approving, is the height of that building and the location of that building and the function of that building. So going back to some of that stuff, it's still prudent to say that, yes, this is below our surface and stuff like that. So I don't know about the acreage because that don't apply to the 7460, I don't believe. I mean, not Part 77 part of it. Really what you're looking at and approving is whether or not that is an obstruction. So really in some of these cases where they're so far out, what you'd be looking at is cell towers and stuff of a lot of height. But as you get closer in, as you'll see on, I think the Lexington property, that building's getting closer and closer to your surface.
Right.
So that's what you're looking at.
That's a whole other bag of peanuts that we'll get to shortly.
What is our recommendation for this property? I mean,
okay. So speaking to that, with 498 Little, I'm now talking on the phone and not looking. 498 Little Oak Street, it would be the operations committee to recommend to planning, or I'm sorry, it would be the operations committee recommendation to the authority that this development be allowed, provided it, and then I'm going to need some jargon here. It's
7460. Yeah.
Provided it complies with the FAA Order 7460.
And the good sense construction listed in the ordinance. We've got all this wording and stuff that we can send to planning.
Right. So
So do we have,
so the operations committee recommendation is going to be to allow the development at 498 Little Oak Street, provided it's in compliance with and compatible with the good sense building codes within the county ordinance and the FAA Order 7460, and so forth.
And unless a committee recommendation does not need a second.
okay, then do we have a vote? How many, let me go around the horn. Diane, do you support the recommendation? Yes or no?
Yes.
Bing?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
David? Yes, obviously. And Michael? Okay, so it carries 5-0. All righty.
All right, moving on. Let's move on to 594 Oconee Street. That's moving westbound, closer to downtown. It's currently a vacant school property. It's just east of the flats at Cars Hill. Very similar issue to the 498 Little Oak Street, where it exists underneath our AZ2 area. What wouldn't be allowed in that area is that it's less than a 1 acre property and that it's a multi-family development. However, provided the information that it's underneath that AZ2 and that the height of the building is proposed to be less than those of surrounding buildings, the flats at Cars Hill is quite a bit higher than, you know, what this would be. I would make the exact same recommendation for 594 Oconee, that the airport authority approves the planned development, provided, again, that it complies with, is compatible with the good sense building, whatever we call them, procedures, good sense building ideology, and the FAA Order 7460.
Okay. So your recommendation is to approve.
Correct.
Going around, Diane, do you support the recommendation? Yes or no?
Yes.
Bing?
I just have a question. Is that property in the overlay district?
Again, it's the same scenario. It's further out west, so the slope, it's underneath the overlay, but the height of the building would not extend into the overlay.
Okay. Yeah. I'm fine with that.
I'm finally understanding the height thing here.
Think of kind of like an upside down wedding cake, and you have tiers moving outward, where the top tier of the wedding cake would be the runway and the airport itself, and then you've got the tiers, shelves per se, going outward. It's similar to that is the way airspace works. This isn't quite airspace, but it's similar in design.
Yeah, I get it. I just don't obviously have the overlay. I was just surprised it reached that far out, but that's fine. Yeah.
The distance on this, correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob and Mike, I think it's 8 miles for the 8 or 10 miles out from the airport for the AZ2 area.
I'd have to double check it, but there's requirements a good ways out.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
It's quite a bit away.
Yeah.
Okay, so David and Robert?
Yes.
support it. Robert? Robert?
Yes.
And Michael?
Yes.
Okay. So that one carries 5-0. Now we come to the good one, David.
All right, this is the big kahuna. This is actually 3 addresses: 1825, 1885, and 1889 Lexington Road. These 3 parcels total 9.42 acres and exist within the AZ2 overlay, as well as both the transition zone, TZ, and runway protection zone, RPZ, airport overlays. The presented plans include 4 new buildings erected across those 3 addresses, totaling 9,600 square feet of space and consisting of 115 total dwelling units, 162 total bedrooms. To protect the airport from encroachment by incompatible uses and to minimize the effects of noise, safety hazards associated with airport operations, Code of Athens-Clarke County, Georgia, sections 913-4, subsection C2, and 913-5 prohibit the use of property within the AZ2 transition zone and runway protection zone airport overlays for multi-family dwellings. It's the Operations Committee to recommend against approval for this plan.
Questions or comments?
Yeah, I'll make a comment. I actually drove onto each of these 3 sites and the other 2 that we've approved. But this one, I just as the layperson, I was shocked how huge the site is, how much they are wanting to build, and how it basically backs up to the fence of the airport property. It's so close. So
this is very close. So going out from the approach end of runway 9, it's within roughly a mile of the approach end to this parcel. So the opposite end of 9 is 27. When you take off heading west, which is pretty prevalent, our winds are often out of the west. In any small aircraft, you will be turning what's called crosswind, basically right over this property. It's going to be a lot of traffic. You know, in the very best case, we have a lot of noise pollution type issues, and in the very worst case, there could be catastrophic issues.
I have another question. When you spoke with the planning people, David, you and Mike, about this proposal, did they offer any additional information aside from what we have in the documents? Did they, when you discussed it with them?
Are you asking me that? They were mostly, matter of fact about, just what the properties are, what their plans are.
Yeah, they didn't offer any other information other than that, any recommendations or anything like that. But in discussing it, we, as a pilot, and David knows this, if you lose an engine, which takeoff's one of your most critical times, if you lose an engine, the best thing to do is to go straight ahead, and try to land. I've seen several planes that try to turn back, and the fate is not very favorable, when they do that, unfortunately. And when you try to turn to the left, that's where this is. And it's an area, in my opinion, that just doesn't need development for safety reasons. 2 things we look at is height and density. But go ahead, Dave.
I want to just make a slight correction to what I said. I had recalled it being less than a mile from the approach end of 9. I'm looking at it now on the map. It's actually under 3,000 feet. So it's about half a mile away 2,700 feet from the approach end of the line. That provides, you know, as a pilot, as an Athens resident, that's real close. Half a mile is right there. Knowing the traffic pattern, it operates right overhead. This is a high density of people in a space that is really reserved very specifically by the FAA to be land used for parking lots, for farmland. You know, this is not an area that the FAA wants there to be multifamily residences. And it would behoove us to consider that highly when we make our forthcoming vote.
Any other comments? If not, let me take the vote that David, the Operations Committee, recommended disapproving this. Diane, do you support the decision?
Support the decision to disapprove.
Dane?
I have a question, Les. I mean, I just want to ask, is it our responsibility to, I know it's our responsibility to be concerned with safety, but I mean, other than the possibility of a aircraft damaging this property or landing on this property, is there any other interference with the operations of the airport?
Well, except for complaints, because when a jet does take off, especially a 717, you know, with some UGA football team, it would go, and they like to take off in that direction. It would go basically very, very close to that, and the noise would be tremendous. So we do get a lot of noise in that area, and then a lot of that is used as a buffer, so that, you know, that we don't put anybody in that area. So we use it as a buffer, so the noise, you know, we won't have that many complaints.
I just recall we had a similar situation sometime back. This might have been before the time Mike. Angela would remember, on the other side of an airport with a multifamily, you know, and we, if I recall, we approved that, you know, with some type of wording saying, yes, we approve this, but don't ever complain about the noise, you know, for lack of a better term. But, you know, my question would be, you could make the argument that any development around the airport could be subject to having a crash on it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I just wonder about the precedent of singling out this one development.
Well, the thing about this one is that the FAA has determined the zones, the approach slopes, the transition zones, and they are impeding on that. Am I correct, Jacob, in that one? They are impeding on those, and we.
Hold on just a minute.
And also remember, you know, these are recommendations to planning and the mayor and commission. Planning can change, you know, can approve it or make a recommendation to approve it. And the mayor commission, of course, in the end, can always approve anything that we don't allow. So
I understand that. I just think it's the duty of the authority to make a recommendation, not on what we personally feel, but, you know, the danger or the fact, you know, whether we think it's a good development or not.
Something bad. I think it is all about safety, and I think we're supposed to decide if this is a violation of the code of ordinances. And it seems like this is the most outrageous one. So, whoever's got the feedback, I don't know if it's me or I don't think so.
Jacob had his hand up.
Yeah, so it's still below the surfaces as the information I sent you. It does get, the property itself is inside of the RPZ, and the RPZ is on the ground. So the property is inside of the current RPZ, and that property and that's runway protection zone. It's a trapezoidal shape at the end of the runway, at each runway, and it's property that FAA wants you to own outright if possible, and not have any obstructions on that ground. It's really property that they want cleared out there, and no trees, no nothing in it. It's really what they want. if possible. And so, and then I looked at the future RPZ, if y'all were to extend that 400 foot for the airport layout plan, and a couple of the buildings are inside of the RPZ or appear to. Now, everything I did was based off of the information provided and some information off of Google, but it did have, the buildings themselves did clear, according to the information I had, or the best guess information I had.
But see, I think my naive interpretation is the whole purpose of the overlay zones is safety more than anything else. So building these or putting these 162 bedrooms in, probably in harm's way. So I don't know what other purpose the ordinances are for.
No, it's our job to protect the airport, you know, and as much as we can, and by making it safe, if something did happen, at least we're covered. You know, we said, hey, you know, we if something did happen in that area, we could say, hey, we denied it, but you know.
I think it's worth mentioning that while, you know, I glossed over, you know, this zone, that zone, and the other zone, this particular zone, the RPZ, is its own entity. This is, you know, like what you're saying, that it wants all airports to own this property outright. This is owned by the airport. Specific ordinance in Athens-Clarke County, 913. While all the are grouped together, the runway protection zone section very specifically to permit the use of agriculture that does not attract wildlife, roadways and parking areas, around utilities, and so forth. It should be cleared land.
With that being said, Les, I would support that recommendation if we're making that recommendation on the fact that this is in the runway protection zone. If we were making that recommendation because this is close to the airport and there could be a, you know, damage to this property from a plane crashing, you could say that for any property anywhere near the airport. So I would certainly recommend or support the fact that it's in the runway protection zone, and that should be stated and that needs to go to the planning commission, that's the purpose of having that zone.
Well, that's why I asked whether we provide rationale for our recommendation, because I agree with Blaine on that.
I mean, they need to know the reason that we recommend that it's denied.
Yeah, it needs to be in there for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bain. My guess is that's what our purpose. They are in the zone, and here are the rules for the zone, and they are. If not, we should rewrite the ordinances probably. But
I would agree with that. Yes,
I appreciate it. David, do you support? Obviously, yes. So, do you?
Yes, I do.
Robert?
I support denial. Yes.
Michael?
Yes, I support the denial.
Okay, 5-0. So we've approved the first two and disapproved the third one. Okay. Any other questions? If not, we'll thank you, David. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Jacob. Mike. I think for the first time, I've now understood that about the under the zone. This has been an aha moment. Okay, moving on. I'm going to take a few minutes. I just pulled together a little presentation because my thoughts were garbled, so it's going to help me stay organized. After Doug, we're up to new business, the Air Service Development. After Doug talked to us about the impact on the industry, I just kept thinking about it, and I came to some decisions in my own head about where we were at. And I also did some research because Doug had recommended maybe an alternative strategy was to put our eggs in with United Express, use them to go to Dulles. So I started seeing where else United Express went. And I found they went to Allentown, and they did it with a bus. And that just opened up all sorts of ideas to me, and I'd like to just show you it and give you some thoughts where I personally would like to invest some of my time, not binding it all to the authority, but get a lot smarter about this. So bear with me. And I pulled this together just because made me think. Okay, so I've called this when the flight is a bus, and this is a concept that I stumbled on with United Express. And what you're really talking about is a bus that to the outside world looks like an airplane. It has a flight number. You book it through the United reservation system, and it gets you where you want to go. So I just started exploring this, and I started thinking after Doug's talk, I went back, and Bain, I really credit you with a lot of where we're at on this. I've always thought of the air service development as a baseball diamond. So we were essentially, when we started off 2 years ago, we were sort of swinging around, but we hadn't had a real organized approach. So we got to first base by when we hired Doug, we created the Air Service Development Group. We got an incentive plan approved. So we had what you would call a business case, and this is the ACRP methodology. So we got to first base that we had the community united, we had a good business case, something that we could take to an airline. Then the SCASDEP helped us secure, so we got to second base. We got between SCASDEP and the county and matching funds, well over $1 million. And the next step would be to get to third base, which I think is the hardest, to get an airline signed on board. And home plate would be launching service and it being successful. So after Doug's chat, I'm pretty convinced, I hate to be pessimistic, but we are sort of left on base, maybe for 4 to 5 years on second base. So it's not a, we can do things occasionally. Mike can go to conferences, but I thought maybe we should be reactive. So I went to some thoughts. We'll talk later. Bain has been very helpful keeping my head straight. Somehow my computer's frozen. So when we had talked about this, and I remember, and I don't mean to put words in anyone's mouth, but we had talked about 2-3 years ago that we all wanted an air service. There were some of us different levels of optimism or pessimism if we could do it. So we said, let's at least follow the process, do the best we can and see where we're at. So we had put our eggs in that basket, essentially trying to get a legacy airline. When I first joined the authority, and I know I've had conversations with a few others, my gut partly told me that we're dealing with an oligarchy and maybe we're going to have to find some new operating models, some business that could actually change the rules, because we're at the mercy of those 4 or 5 legacy carriers. So I just gave some examples there of some new operating models. One is unserved cities. This is Dave Nelman from JetBlue. Going to go, Beth had a great name for these. I can't remember them, but if you look around a lot of cities like Atlanta, there's usually a fair-sized airport an hour and a half away that could serve as a buffer, and you could create service. And that's the model he's looking at. Then you have a thing that's an oxymoron, I think, public charter or scheduled charter. There's a company, Jet Suite, that provides daily service to several cities in California. JetBlue's invested in them. They're actually a charter. The prices are between a normal flight and a charter. Another thing we've talked about is private charters. Just expanding it, because I think we've chatted, there's a great potential market here between the university, all the different organizations, the Classic Center running a shuttle. So if we could get a charter company in here that instead of waiting to get a call was proactively marketing it, that could be a different operating model. And then I stumbled on this bus, which Bain and I had discussed. excuse me. If nothing else, maybe trying to get Groom out here and use the airport as a place to park and leave on Groom. And so that one was still always in the back of my head. And then I stumbled on this United Express model. So I wanted to just show it to you. And I want to give an example how it would work. I can't see you all, but if you have a question, just speak up. So here's a hypothetical case. If I was in Athens, wanted to go to Chicago, Ord, and then back to Athens, this is how this using a bus could work. And this is going to be based on the United Express model. So we're not talking about Star Wars. This is something that I think was still operational until COVID. So what I would do, I would go online to United and I would book flight 123 to Atlanta. Turns out, and I'll show you a detailed walkthrough, flight 123 would actually be a bus. I would then, and I will go over it, and also book a flight from Atlanta to Ord, flight 456, and I would essentially have one ticket with two flights, the Atlanta leg and the Chicago leg. Returning, I would book a flight to Atlanta and then a connecting flight to Athens. So in this case, the two connections would be a bus, but if you didn't know it was a bus, your ticket, how you booked it, it would all appear to be a flight. So the way it works, I just did all these 2 hours ago. So if I go to Athens, I would park in our parking lot for, I think we've talked about in the past, minimal charge. I would check my luggage in Athens, and it would be, I would pick it up in Chicago. I would never touch it. Somehow it would get from the bus to the flight to Chicago, just as if a connecting flight would. I could check into my flights. I could do it beforehand, and I would board the bus in, I would board the bus in Athens. And this is the United model with Allentown going to Newark. We would arrive at the main terminal. I would like to see something a little different. We'd get off, darn it, nervous fingers. We'd get off the bus. We would clear security in Atlanta. It'd be nice if we could have actually done that in Athens. We would go to the gate and board the plane. When we got to Chicago, get off the plane and our luggage would be there waiting for us. On the reverse trip back, it's even more interesting because I could check my luggage in Chicago, check into my flights here, clear security in Chicago, go to the gate and board the plane to Atlanta. Get off the plane in Atlanta, walk to my gate, which would be on the other side of security. So I'm not going through security. If I landed at B12, there might be a C30. And I've seen this in Cincinnati where it'd be a bus where I'd pick up my bus to Athens, board the bus, get off the bus in Athens and pick up luggage. I'd have all the protection, no different than a connecting flight if the bus was late. I don't think you get frequent flyer points, but that'd be nice. But essentially, other than the clearing security in Atlanta, it would almost appear like you had caught a plane to Atlanta, then on to Chicago. Being a bus, we could probably run a lot more frequent service than you could with a airplane. And we could also go to Atlanta, which we know was prohibitive using a plane. So there is a company called Landline. I sent you a couple of articles. That's a private bus company that's trying to do this in Chicago, in Minneapolis. They're going from Duluth to Minneapolis. But ultimately, in that case, they're getting a company called Sun Airlines to sponsor it. So all the seats are essentially booked by Sun, and you still book your tickets on Sun Airlines. So I see several challenges. You'd have to get an airline sponsor, so someone who's going to allow for this booking and the transfer of luggage and the flight privileges. You'd have to have a gate in the terminal for the bus, for the connecting flight back. I think it'd be great if the first two are must-haves. The next are nice to have. It'd be great if we could actually do security in Athens, and the bus end up at that same gate in the terminal. Somehow the bus would have to be hermetically sealed, but that's we can track the bus, know if it stopped. It'd be nice to get frequent flyer miles for the bus part. And a point Mike has rightfully brought up, the Athens would want to treat the boardings as enplanements, so these would count for us getting $1 million with our 10,000 enplanement. My last slide is, so I personally, and I think maybe in a few months we could formally talk about this more. If someone wants to help me, would appreciate it. Maybe Mike can be involved with some calls. I'd like to talk to the Mike's counterparts in Allentown when they've done this. Beaumont, Texas did it. And the Netherlands, I forget the cities, KLM's been doing it for several years. Then it'd be interesting if we could talk to some airline executives, see what they thought about it. We need to chat to this CEO of Landline who is trying to create this brand new company, see why he thinks it's a good business. Be interesting to learn how much it costs to operate a bus. Maybe ACC Gov could tell us that. And then I think we could get some help if we could get interest from the UGA Innovation Center. I've talked to, and Mike's met him too at the chamber, because I can't remember his name, Seth or something, Keith. He said if we came up with an operating model that was disruptive, they'd be happy to work with us. And then I know we might want to talk to Mead and Hunt. Mike's talked to Doug on another topic, brought this up. Doug was not totally keen on it. And then the other point would be to see if we have this $700,000, if it could potentially be supplied to this alternate solution. So let me turn this off on share. So I guess would love to hear some feedback. I feel personally just it's a challenge to learn more about this. But, you know, I think like any new operating model, you can find 5 reasons not to do it. But ultimately, the result would be the same almost as if I flew on an airplane. So the result will be where you want to be, but maybe with a different way of doing it. So any comments or what your thoughts are?
Yeah, the only thing like I brought up already was that by doing that, we don't see any FAA employment credits toward our $1 million by doing this. And I had talked to Doug about it too, just to see what his thoughts were. And he, like you said, he kind of advised against it because we don't want to get anything in here that might show competition and detour from our goal of trying to get passenger service. But it is something different,
Anyone else? I know John talked a bit about it, but
I would just say, Les, you and I've talked about this a lot, and I mean, I'm sure there are lots of models out there. I certainly didn't leave the last board meeting encouraged that we're going to be getting an airline in Athens anytime soon. So I certainly think, and this is my last meeting, but I certainly think that everyone should be considering other things that we could do to encourage use of the airport, with the hopes that could lead to something bigger and better down the road.
anyone else have thoughts on it or?
Yeah, Les, like I told you, I think getting some other information might be useful to pursue some of the details. I do wonder how one could ever get around the security question. And then also,
the model I showed you would have to go through security in Atlanta.
yeah.
So
And then the time factor, that the bus is going to take an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes to get to Atlanta. And so you'd have to convince people not to drive because they can drive that in that time, So anyway, I mean, I think it's an interesting idea to pursue, find out some more information about.
yes, if you counter Doug, Mike, I think we have to worry about scaring someone off, because I think the earliest we're going to get something, if we get anything at all, is 4 or 5 years. I just don't see, unless we look at some alternative, an airline coming here, given the situation. And
Les, what do we have to lose?
yeah, and that's the, and I think when you get new operating models, question of the money, these are, for this to happen, you would have to change policies. I think the exciting thing about this is that it doesn't require some major new invention, doesn't require, it's really just some policies that have to change. So I would love to learn more about it, and we'll keep bending gears. I think Diane, I know personally, I think I would use this service. I would be more attracted if I didn't have to go through security, but the fact my luggage is handled, if I miss it, if we actually had a plane going to Atlanta, you probably would easily still be an hour. And if it wasn't a Delta plane, you would have to go through security.
I just from personal experience, I've ridden Groom a number of times and find it to be very crowded, very uncomfortable. You're packed in like a can of sardines, and I think there may be some part of the population that would be willing to pay a premium to ride on more of an executive type bus where you didn't have to handle your luggage, you had your own private seat, you didn't have to deal with parking and all of those things.
So get by security, then it would be a home run. But
I mean,
game changer if you could skip security. Absolutely, yes.
most places in the world have, these limousine buses that go back and forth. I mean, Japan, even if it's a distance about what Athens is, you're in a really nice bus and you don't have to worry about traffic and you get there.
yeah, see, on the way, yeah, I'm sorry.
I mean, Groom is about as bad as it can be.
Yeah, see here that you would,
So I think people would really consider it because you don't have to worry about traffic and you can work while you're on the bus.
the landline company actually has a stewardess on the bus, and they serve food and drinks. But the key is that I found interesting. It's a flight, so you actually, if the bus is late, and if you notice on the return trip, you don't have to go through security again when you hit Atlanta. So it's just on the inbound. But I'm going to get.
I use a similar service in Texas called Von Lane.
It's from Beaumont.
There's a service in Texas called Von Lane. They run between Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, and Austin. It's very similar, although they don't pick up at the airport, but they take you to the airport. It's an executive bus. I mean, you board the bus, you have Wi-Fi, you have a comfortable seat, you have a attendant. Whatever the proper term for that is these days, and those type of things. And it's the same price as flying basically, but you skip the hassle of the airport and a lot of the hassles related to flying. Now it's not operated by an airline, but it's an alternative to the airline, of course. But there's a lot of business models out there. I just think with it, we should be open to anything that increases traffic at the airport. And if you had a model like that worked and people used it, airlines might actually take note that there is a business model that could work there. So that's my 2 cents.
I appreciate it's. I think if I was going to Delta, remember our study showed they only had 48% of the market. This might help them again, our catchment area would have to be smaller because you're not going to drive from Lawrenceville up here to take the bus that passes your house. But so I'm going to I can't personally, and I appreciate the feedback, just stay on second base for 4 or 5 years without exploring some other topics. So, and again, I truly appreciate the employments thing, Mike, and that's something that, again, these are all things that you could try and work out.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you all for listening. I'm sort of intrigued by it still, and we'll see where we go from here. Strategic plan update. We've chatted before. every year we wanted to update the strategic plan. I'll be calling a meeting of the committee chairs and Mike, and maybe Josh, so we can go and look over the existing plan, figure out what initiatives we want to do in FY21, set targets that haven't been already set by the budget. We need to rewrite goal 1. It needs to be much more about infrastructure, as we've learned from Josh. Josh has been a great source on strategic planning. And so I'll be sending out a doodle or something next week to myself, Diane, David, Mike, and Josh. All righty. Bylaws amendments. I'm going to turn this over to Diane. She has requested to look into a change to the bylaws, which made good sense. But why don't you go ahead, Diane, and update everyone?
All right, I'll be brief. You will remember that Les asked all of us actually to just take a look at the bylaws for any ingredients that need to be updated or corrected. And I did do a close edit of the bylaws. One thing that I found interesting that needs to be updated is in section or Article 5, Section 2, there's a statement about the fact that telephone conference call meetings are prohibited, and here we are in them. There's language in the bylaws, and it happens all the time. There's language that simply now needs to be updated. So anyway, Mike actually had a call in to Jeff Montgomery about what the official word is going to be regarding WebEx meetings as we all move forward. Would they be allowed as an option? Would they be, at some point just terminated and we go back to face-to-face meetings only? And then also probably, I think Mike may also be hearing from the city attorney on that language. I had drafted some potential language to use, and I discussed this with Les. Obviously it would be something about that our procedure for meetings would be in accordance with the prevailing ACC Gov policy for open records meetings or public meetings, but we might as well wait till we get the official word. When I did a much more close edit of the text of the bylaws, there are other things that need to be updated because some things have changed. We don't notify the official newspaper anymore of upcoming meetings. The whole system of notification, has changed. There are typos that need to be corrected. There are other small things, such as the fact that there are some places where the term is mayor and commission, other places it's mayor and commissioners. We can tidy up the language in it and make it consistent. I'm willing to do the work, but as I suggested to Les, obviously the document, needs to be fixed. And so if we could table it, I'll do the work and then I'll bring that corrected draft document to Les and then to the rest of you for your review. But it's a fairly standard thing, I think, to do for bylaws. And because things have changed so much, it would be a good thing to do to clean up the errors, the inconsistencies. There are little things, even, for example, the use of the word chair in one place, but chairman in another. And at some point there may be a female chair coming, so just to sort of update for current word usage would be a good thing to do. I've identified a number of things. So I'll fix them and then send them to Les. If you agree, to maybe the suggestion of tabling it for the end of July meeting.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Do you want me to propose a motion, request?
No, we don't need a motion. We don't need a motion for that.
All right. Well, I'll look forward to doing that, and then I'll be back in touch with Les, okay?
If you can have stuff for the next meeting, that'd be great.
Okay.
Good. Then our last thing, it's with sadness, it's time to bid farewell to, but not permanently. Well, we still have contact with Michael and Bain. I know I think I speak for everyone. I'm going to miss you both of you. I've come to know you both well. Tried to meet individually. Michael's been a great help on the Air Service Development Committee. He's really helped with the SCASDEP. He helped a lot with our first grant. And Mike, I think Michael just always brings some really great wisdom and advice. So Gonna really miss you, Michael. Bain, a similar story. I'm gonna miss, not only is Bain not gonna be able to go to coffee with me anymore, where we used to go is out of business now, Ike and Jane's, and Bain would even buy me coffee. And I think Bain in many ways was the architect of our strategic plan. Definitely helped get us straight on where we were headed with air service development. And he's just always been a great source of common sense. Plus, I think Bain knows everyone in Athens. When we were having trouble getting reference letters, I remember calling Bain. The next thing I know, he was getting us contacts with the governors, all sorts of people, president of First American Bank. And so just going to really miss you. But Bain has said we can continue to go to coffee. We're just going to have to find a new place. So, Mike, do you want to say anything? And then maybe Bain and Michael or anyone else.
I would like to say, I've been here 2 years. And I've been through a lot of commissioners, a lot of authority members, and the two of you are very smart. I mean, very, very smart, very bright, and you bring a lot to this authority, and it's all common sense stuff, which is really what I like to work with, is common sense stuff that really makes sense. And both of you brought that to this authority, and I've seen what you've done in the past from just looking through the window in the past, but also I see what you brought to the future. And when I first got here, the strategic planning and all, I mean, you guys had it on the money every single time, and we were able to bring the strategic plan. I think we were one of the first departments, perhaps, in ACC, kind of ahead of the game, because you guys really saw, where we needed to be, and you had the forethought, the foresight of that, and I appreciate that. Really, I'm going to miss you guys.
I think you had something, maybe.
I do. I don't know if it's. Yeah, I've got two of these, one for each of you, and I don't know if you can see it, but we've got a few things left to do with it, and then it'll be ready by next week for you too.
So please
Well,
keep.
thanks.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Michael.
I just wanted to say it's been an honor to serve with all of you, and I hope we still stay in touch and go have coffee and discuss things. It's been a real pleasure for me, and let's keep in touch with each other.
Maybe you'll sit next to me on the bus to area of common sense, but.
Well, Les, I would echo what Michael said. It's been a real pleasure, and I've enjoyed getting to know everyone. And, I think I sent you a note. I kind of look back, and there's been a lot of accomplishments by the authority in the last 4 years that, we've all contributed to, and a lot of great things have happened. And Mike, I really appreciate your leadership. A lot of great things are happening there. And, my final request is, Michael Pierce, now that you're not on the authority, spend some time getting us a cure for this coronavirus, and maybe we can all get back to normal one of these days soon. So,
well, there'll be a vaccine if we can just convince people to get vaccinated. But it's not going to be tomorrow. It's going to be the end of next year, probably.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. It really has been an honor for me, and I appreciate it. Appreciate the time that I've been allowed to spend with you all.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add, I haven't had as long to work with you two gentlemen as everybody else, but I've enjoyed meeting both of you. Michael, I've enjoyed working with you on our little committee. But I haven't had much chance to work with you, but I certainly have appreciated getting to know you a little bit, and I wish you both all the very best.
Thank you.
We might call the new financial report the Bain report. How's that?
Something with his name on it. Yeah.
Actually, I spend 90% of my time looking at financial reports. You took the brunt of that. Sorry.
Any other new business before we do we have a motion to end the meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, someone second it?
I'll
Everyone approve?
Aye.
4. David's floating around somewhere, but
Yeah, I approve. Sorry.
thank you, David, for all the work on the overlay district. So, okay, everyone stay safe.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Out.
All right, everyone be safe.
Okay.
All right, thank you, guys.
See you, Robert.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
bye-bye.
you all. Thank you, Ben and Michael.
Thanks a lot, Mike, and thanks a lot, Les. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. We'll see you later.